We are in the year 1492, an era of brave explorers, majestic ships and mysterious new worlds. In the magnificent halls of Tordesillas in Spain, the two most powerful nations in the world at the time, Portugal and Spain, came together to decide the fate of the world. With a single stroke of the pen, they drew an invisible line across the world map, a line that would determine not only their fate but that of millions. For in this treaty, the two powers divided the world between them and did so at the highest level with the approval of the Pope in Rome. What sounds completely absurd today was actually a reality. In an incredibly selfish act, the two states barred the New World to the other Europeans and had their dominion over the whole world confirmed by treaty. And so the Treaty of Tordesillas became an agreement that established colonial empires, shaped cultures and set the geopolitical stage for centuries to come. But how did this incredible agreement come about, how was it divided up in detail, and what influence does the treaty still have today? We take a look at all these fascinating questions in today's video. From the year 1492, the following years were characterized by an unprecedented wave of discoveries and explorations. At the forefront of this movement were two emerging maritime powers, Portugal and Spain. During this time, both nations began to test the boundaries of the known world and search for new routes and territories. In the middle of the century, two drastic events changed Europe. Firstly, the conquest of Constantinople by the Ottomans in the year 1453 led to the end of the Byzantine or Eastern Roman Empire. This date is considered by many historians to be the end of the Middle Ages, as it shifted the focus away from Europe and the Middle East to the New World. After the conquest of Constantinople, access to the lucrative Asian trade was made much more difficult for Europeans. And so the Portuguese, who were regarded as one of the most important trading powers, began to look for alternative routes. And so the Portuguese systematically expanded their knowledge of the Atlantic, discovered the Azores and Madeira and sailed further south along the African coast. Portuguese outposts were now established all along the African coast. Their aim was to find a direct sea route to India and break the lucrative spice trade monopoly. And it was only a few decades before this was achieved. This dream finally became reality when Bartholomew Dias sailed around the Cape of Good Hope in the year 1488. But let us now look at the second decisive event of the time, the unification of Spain. For centuries, Muslim and Moorish dynasties had ruled the south of Spain. However, a battle broke out between them and the northern Christian kingdoms, who wanted to reconquer these territories. This war, known as the Reconquista, lasted for over 7 centuries, but finally came to an end. The turning point came in the year 1469 with the marriage of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. This union united the two most powerful Christian kingdoms on the peninsula and laid the foundations for a united Spain. In the year 1992, they finally succeeded in conquering the last Moorish kingdom in Granada, completing the process of Spanish unification. With the unification and consolidation of Spain as a united kingdom, a central political and military power now emerged that was able to finance large-scale expeditions and build a huge overseas empire. And this was not long in coming. In the same year, Christopher Columbus, equipped with generous funding from the royal couple, discovered America in the name of Spain. These parallel developments catapulted Portugal and Spain to the top of the global power structures. Their navigators and explorers laid the foundations for an age of exploration that would change cartography, trade and international diplomacy forever. Spanish and Portuguese were to become world languages, and the understanding of these languages became a key to cultural integration and communication with hundreds of millions of people. Rumors of the discovery of America and a sea route to the Indies naturally spread rapidly in Europe, especially in Spain and Portugal. When Columbus returned to Europe from his voyage from America in March of the year 1493, he was forced to call at Lisbon first due to the weather conditions. The Portuguese King John II thus received first-hand information about the discoveries and immediately sent a messenger to the Spanish court to try to wrest the territories for the Portuguese crown. Portugal's King John invoked an older treaty with Spain, according to which Portugal was to receive all territories discovered south of the Canary Islands. The latter clearly applied to the islands of Hispaniola and Cuba, where Columbus had actually landed. Nevertheless, the Spaniards firmly refused, as at that time they knew nothing about the more distant areas of what is now America. And this laid the foundations for the race between the Spanish and Portuguese for the New World. In the meantime, both kingdoms were investing heavily in seafaring and their military and were constantly sending new explorers to annex new territories. However, these parallel discoveries also led to increasing uncertainty regarding territorial claims. Who had the right to act in which territories? What happened if two explorers from both sides stuck their flag in the sand? All these questions became urgent when it became clear that the newly discovered lands and sea routes were invaluable. The Spanish crown turned to Pope Alexander VI, who himself came from Spain and who promptly sided with his compatriots. In his famous bull Inter Terra Divini, he established a demarcation line for the first time to separate Spanish and Portuguese territory. The line at the time ran around 500 kilometers west of the Cape Verde Islands, but this was clearly not enough for the Portuguese. And so, in the year 1994, the two powers met in Tordesillas, Spain, to clarify matters once and for all. A clear dividing line was to be drawn between the territories claimed by Spain and Portugal. This was intended to prevent further conflicts between the two maritime powers. And so an imaginary line was officially drawn in the treaty, dividing the Atlantic west of the Cape Verde Islands from north to south. Areas to the west of this line were to be explored and colonized by Spain, while the areas to the east were assigned to Portugal. Under pressure from the Portuguese, however, the border was now drawn over 1,000 kilometers further west. And this proved to be a real stroke of luck, because in the year 1500, the Portuguese officially discovered Brazil, which was now clearly within the Portuguese zone. Many today speculate that the Portuguese probably knew of Brazil's existence earlier, but kept it a secret during the treaty negotiations. In any case, this was to have far-reaching consequences, as Portuguese is still spoken in South America's largest country today. And with over 200 million people, Portuguese is now considered one of the most important languages in the world. Nevertheless, the treaty also left many questions unanswered. No one was really clear about the exact geographical length of the dividing line. At that time, it was not even possible to determine a longitude exactly. Moreover, the Spaniards did not stop in America and were still obsessed with reaching India by the Western Sea route. Magellan achieved this in the year 1522 during his circumnavigation of the globe, which meant that Spain now also occupied territories in East Asia. Another agreement was reached, the Treaty of Saragossa. In addition to the western demarcation line across the Atlantic, an eastern demarcation line was now also established across the Pacific. And so the division of the world seemed complete. However, as the Pacific crossing was extremely dangerous, the Spanish focused primarily on building up their colonial empire in America. The Portuguese also invested heavily in their colonial empire in South America. The Treaty of Tordesillas thus laid the foundations for two of the most powerful colonial empires in history, whose cultural and linguistic influence continues to have an impact to this day. Nevertheless, the treaty did not last forever, as originally stipulated. New players were soon to enter the world stage, first and foremost the English, French and Dutch. And they cared relatively little about the borders set at the time.